tell you what, I'll try it like this. Let's see how it goes. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Guys, welcome back to the Konkering Pod. We are here. Was that all right?
That was
perfect. Nailed that, mate.
Can we that?
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that, aren't I? Right. Welcome to the Konkering Pod. Say it again. We'll do it again. Back in there. We got Tom. We got Maddie. Home team. Pat behind the camera. BTS. Yep. Excellent stuff. We are talking about something which I'm actually quite excited to talk about today. I feel like we're going to be able to talk about this an awful lot. Something which I think should be at the forefront of everybody's minds. This is a recruitment mini-series, actually, by the way. I'll put that in there.
FYI.
It's obviously in the title. I think it feel like it should be at the forefront of everybody's minds, but maybe people don't think about this. I've got a feeling people don't think about this as much as they should do.
Well, we were just talking in the kitchen, Maddie and I, and we said, who is ever even having this conversation about what we're talking about?
We're talking about candidate experience. So the impact of meeting and exceeding a candidate's experience.
So let's just recap very slightly. So far in the recruitment mini-series, we've spoken about, we've done 2 already?
Candidate attraction in terms of adverts, job description.
Difference between job adverts and job descriptions.
Working out exactly, what
Your
and why
why
we're hiring.
Yeah.
So we've almost got to the point of the process now that we've got good adverts out there, attracting the right people. We understand why we're recruiting. And now the next phase is all about the experience that the candidates go through from the point of application, or even earlier than that.
I think so. This is why I think it could be quite a long conversation because, we'll talk about definitely application. I think interview sort of process is a big one, isn't it? Really, because that's the sort of first impressions. But just candidate experience or customer experience in general as a whole for anybody coming to your website or dealing with your business, I think that rolls into it really nicely and just so relevant. Doesn't have to be recruiting, does it?
No.
Every experience that your candidate or customer has with your business should be a positive one.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we're going to do today is just highlight the impact of meeting the candidate experience and then exceeding it, because a little stat here, according to Stard, 58% of candidates have actually turned down a job offer because of the candidate experience that they've received. So they've got to the point where they've actually got an offer and they've said no thank you because of their experience, and that can be changed so easily.
Yeah, it can. It's literally that simple. And like you were saying, who is thinking about this? Who's actually having these conversations?
Well, any company that's ever going to be hiring. Obviously, it's interesting for us because from our perspective, this is very like recruitment jargon, recruitment lingo.
This is something we think about every day.
So we think about and we talk about and we understand the importance of, and we try and communicate and sort of make the clients that we recruit for aware of the importance of a candidate experience and the candidate journey and the impact that can have on your perception as an employer and then therefore your overall employer brand.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of businesses that maybe are hiring, it's something that it isn't even a term or a phrase or an idea that's maybe at the forefront of their mind. That's why I think it's such an important topic, and like this is actually so valuable for people to listen to and read about or research bits and pieces. Yeah, if I don't say so. Bits and pieces like this, because the impact is actually huge.
Yeah, I think. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to recap what candidate experience actually is, in case people out there don't know it.
Definitely.
So the definition I've got in front of me, which is from an article that I put together.
Another one.
How a candidate experience is how a candidate feels about your company once they experience the hiring process. So going further on from that, like you just said, Jev, it's probably prior to them actually going into apply for a job.
It's their very first touch point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think to start off with, to change to sort of actually start thinking about candidate experience, you've got to shift your mindset, and this can be for any company. If you're an employer and you're hiring, you've got to change your mindset to, I need to attract people to the business rather than everybody wants to work for me. And I know we've been through this in our previous podcast with the job advert, job description, that sort of thing. But I think there are so many big companies out there, maybe they do have the luxury of just having lots and lots of applications come forward, but they still need to make their candidate experience a positive one to get the best applications and more applications, because it can very easily go the other way, can't it?
Yeah.
But for smaller businesses, I think they're probably more so in this mindset that they have to attract people But the better they can get into that mindset and the better they can attract and offer a better candidate experience, the better they'll be able to bring best talent onto their business.
Yeah, totally agree. So what do candidates actually want from this experience then?
I don't know. They want loads. We just want it to be easy, simple, quick and fun, surely.
Yeah, I think one thing that they definitely want is easy to find information. Again, another stat, 52% of candidates like to visit a careers website and use social media to find out more, but a third of employers are not posting career-related content to their social channels. So number one, if you're not doing it already, start posting career-related content to your socials. Candidates just want easy to find information, as much of it as possible.
So I think step by step, you can always say easy to find information and plenty of info out there so you can properly understand a business before you're applying to them. A straightforward application process. So then, an actual easy way to apply to a position. And again, this is a whole subject in itself, but what does that application process look like and what are you asking and requiring of candidates? We've probably got some examples that we can speak about of businesses that we work with that might ask for a cover letter to accompany a CV or a written letter specifically about the business that they're applying to. And I've actually had one of those scenarios just recently with an engineering consultancy, relatively small business. They've asked for a bespoke cover letter to be written to accompany a CV and be all about exactly why the person is interested in working for that company. And the candidate just hasn't done it. They've applied to several other positions, got interviews with other businesses, and now that other company hasn't had that application. So all of a sudden I
do find that such a tricky one. I totally get both sides because it almost sort of conflicts with what we were talking about, a couple of weeks ago with the job description, job advert, making sure you're finding the right people that want to work for you and, being really obvious with your expectations. You could turn around and the client could turn around and say, well, if they're not willing to put a quick cover letter together, they're not interested in our business. So why would we want them in the business? That's the flip side, isn't it? So it's a really difficult one. You've got to look at it both ways. You've got to make it, and it's a real fine line, but you've got to make your application process easy enough for people to want to join and apply easy, but for you to get the right kind of information that you're getting the right applications and the right people.
I think down to that scenario, is that more to do with the actual candidate? And I might be speaking out of turn, but because the candidate has more opportunities, then they're not kind of applying themselves to one business in particular. They don't want to work at that business specifically. They just want a job. So is it down to, like Jevon said, if you're willing to put a cover letter together, you're more aligned for that business?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because I think that, again, using this specific example, it's a candidate short market. He's an engineer with some really good experience and he's got other options that are interested in meeting him and the process just moves quickly. He's in work full time, taking time out to go and interview businesses, see companies. It's a much just easier, frictionless process with other businesses, and therefore he's just moving through that process much quicker.
Yeah. You've got to know your market, haven't you?
I think you've got to know your market.
You've got to know your market. I mean, similar, personal experience from my side. I heard of a story from a client, I think a long time ago, but graduates, they're looking for graduates. Their graduate process and interview process is quite stringent for a sort of small, medium-sized business. They get their graduates to do a presentation on their chosen subject. They've got some quite intense questions which you'd never be able to prepare for. They're mad, sciencey engineering questions. So you'd never know they're coming up. And the reason why they get the presentation is to, find out what they're passionate about and how they would present to people. The reason why they ask the questions, the difficult questions that you'd never be able to prepare for, is so they can understand how they would come to conclusions with different questions and how they would sort of, what their thinking is around it. So I totally get why they're doing it. That's a really tough experience for a graduate, who hasn't got experience. And, there are a few stories that came out of that where some graduates just did not enjoy it. They found it so difficult. It was a 2-hour interview in Microsoft Teams, face to face. You had to do this presentation, really, really uncomfortable. And a few people came out, having done really well, received an offer from this client, but took something else because they just didn't enjoy it. You know,
They just thought that the whole
yeah, it's just
experience
too,
of working
too
there
intense.
might just be that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's
Yeah.
the point that I'm getting onto. Like, you know, your experience shows exactly what your business is going to be like in the long run. And to be honest, with that company in particular, it probably is a good reflection of what they're like. They are really good engineers, like really meticulous, really good people. They retain their staff really well, but that's not for everyone. You know, they're not opening their talent pool for as many people as they possibly could, really. And then on the flip side, you know, I would say that's quite a good interview process. It's very much how you go around it, isn't it? You know, sometimes, you know, if you're quite a prickly interviewer, if you're quite like direct to the point, you know, again, that can be quite hard. But on the flip side, I've had interviewers where they meet them in the lobby, you know, meet a graduate in the lobby, and it's a 20-minute interview. You know, they haven't even got their CV ready. They're asking questions which are quite clearly already on the CV, that sort of stuff. And you kind of think, well, if this is like the interview process and it's a one-stage interview, it's just the rest of the business going to be, you know, completely blasé. You know, is it just like, you know, slapdash, here we go, not a lot of quality?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is, yeah, probably
Yeah,
is.
it probably is.
Yeah.
What I think, so what my thought there is when you're speaking about the first example of it being a really intense process, I think that what is good there is if they just justify it or like or set the expectation or explain why this is their process and this is the reason we like to do it in this manner, because then people that have gone through that process and it hasn't been right for them wouldn't go back into and talk to their peers and talk to people that they meet in the industry and say, oh, I had this crazy interview experience with this company and it just completely put me off, because that's when a company can almost build a bad name for itself. Whereas if they said, I had this crazy experience, but they do it in this way because X, Y, and Z, it wasn't quite right for me. Yeah. You know, that's a much better perception for that company all the time, isn't it? So I think as long as you like justify and actually, not necessarily justify, but just explain the reason that a certain process is a certain way, then that's kind of fine.
Yeah.
Does that come down to like the feedback then? That's the feedback after the interview.
I think it comes down to feedback, but I think it also comes down to setting expectations.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't say it is feedback.
It's setting expectations,
to start off with. You know, this is what we do. This is our process. This is why we do it. You know, when we interview, you know, the latest they'll know about our full process, which is, you know, sometimes a 3-stage interview, is, you know, midway through or at the end of the first interview. You know, they'll understand exactly what's coming. And I think if you just, you know, you expect what's coming and you know what's coming and you've justified the reasons for doing it, everybody's like on the same train tracks there, aren't they? Everyone's on the same lines.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what's coming.
Yeah, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
No.
So go back to your question about what do candidates want, I think they want easy to find information, a clear application process. But then I think the most important part is just clear expectations throughout each stage. And I think you should probably be setting expectations at each stage of your hiring process. So when somebody makes an application, you should probably set expectations in regards to how quickly you'd come back to that person and when they could expect feedback or an update. Once they've been invited for an interview, set expectations about the interview process, set expectations about the feedback from the interview process, set expectations about when an offer might come, and then a start date and so on and so forth. And I think if you're constantly setting expectations throughout the whole process, like Jev's just said, the candidate's just fully aligned with what's happening and there's going to be no surprises.
If it's not for them, it's not for them.
Yeah.
You know, but it is. But if it is for them, they understand why they're going through all these things, rather than thinking, "Why is this interviewing sitting here, you know, firing off questions at me, which I'll never know the answers to?" Yeah, it's totally that. It's totally that. I've got a little stat here, you know, just going on from the point of those two sort of situations. But 68% of candidates think that a company's hiring process reflects how it treats its employees. And you could also say...
I'd say that's quite low.
I'd say that's quite low, yeah, because I almost think it's a little bit obvious.
Yeah.
Should that be a lot higher? But I mean, that's how it treats its employees.
Yeah.
So again, you know, if it is a really tough interview process, if, you know, you get a vibe the interviewer doesn't like you or is being a bit harsh or being really, really critical, that's probably how they're going to treat their people and going to treat their future employees.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if they're really, really nice people, offer them a really good experience. It's a really fun sort of place to be.
Yeah.
It's a nice interview. You know, you get to know each other really, really well. It's probably how the people are going to be, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting as well, like neither of those are the wrong way to be, because for some people working at a company, like they thrive on like direct instructions and like being like micromanaged, I suppose, and being a bit more like strict with meetings and stuff, whereas some people obviously don't. So I don't think there's a right or wrong there.
What do we do? What do we do well? Or what do we feel like we do well for our candidate experience? From a first interview, or first touch point, first conversation?
I think, from stage one in terms of career related content, there's loads of that for us out there.
Yeah.
We get a lot of that kind of stuff out there content wise.
Yeah, I think another thing that we do quite well, which is, again, moving on from easy to find information, is a lot of, our team post about Konker as well. And here, a little stat that leads generated by employees sharing their company's content on LinkedIn, for example, convert 7 times more frequently than any other kind of lead. So if your team is shouting about how much they enjoy their work, any socials that they get up to, their career progression, any successes, then that's only going to influence more people to apply for jobs.
Yeah, we spoke about this last time, didn't we? The opinion of the people that are working in the business builds credibility for people that are potentially interested in working there.
Yeah.
I think... Go on.
Well, I think what we also do well, and it's really, really simple. I imagine a lot of other businesses do this, but when we get applications and people call us up, it's not a case of thank you for your application, come and meet us. There's a conversation. You have a conversation and you have a quick chat about what's going on. It's a 10-20 minute conversation, but you do get a vibe for somebody and you do get to understand their experience. If you don't feel like they're the right kind of person, you haven't really wasted anyone's time by getting them in for an interview.
Yeah.
And if you did bring them in for an interview and you hadn't had that conversation and they weren't quite the right person, you'd have to feel like you're going through the motions to try and sort of get them out the door quicker. You're not going to offer them a very good experience then. Yeah. And you would have wasted both people's time, and then you would have had to let somebody down and say, no, it's not for you, sort of thing. So that first conversation actually can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
By saving your time, but not just getting people in and, going through the motions, having to get them out the door, not giving them a good experience. If you know somebody's not right and they're sitting in front of you, you kind of got to give them the hour, don't you?
Yeah.
But if you didn't give them the time of the day, they would know that.
Yeah, that'd be a poor experience.
That'd be a poor experience.
Yeah. Definitely.
No, yeah, you're spot on. So that initial conversation, it's a little screening call, isn't it, really? Yeah. I guess you could describe that as that. That's definitely really good that we do. And then I think we're pretty we set expectations nicely, so we let people know how quickly we can move certain things. We get people in pretty quickly. If they've expressed an interest, we'll get people in an interview pretty soon. Our interview process or our first stage interview is
fairly long.
Fairly long.
Has been 2+ hours in the past. But that's normally if it's Jeff get chatting, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you get me talking on a subject.
Yeah.
But I think it works though. It's not just, chat or conversation, because you get to know people.
Yeah.
And, I think, again, know your industry, know your sector. Our sector is recruitment. It's a people business, isn't it?
Yeah.
If people can talk and have good conversations about random things being thrown at them, not necessarily difficult things, but hold good conversations, they're going to be able to have good conversations with clients, candidates, and actually make it an engaging process. So for us, that makes the experience really nice for them, because they're talking about things which they probably want to talk about. It's interesting conversations. But also, translate into exactly how they would work further on down the line, and you're almost qualifying that as well. So know your industry. What skills do you want to learn from people from that meeting? And yes, our interview stage can be a little bit lengthy, but it's a fun process, and both parties get an awful lot from that.
Yeah, I think another thing that we do really well, or you do really well, is every person that's coming for an interview has to walk through the sales floor and the office, and everybody says hello to
gauntlet.
them. And you kind of get you do get a good feel for the office, especially if we're playing table football at lunch or something. Everybody, when I came in, I felt really at ease, and that was just a nice way to begin the process. And leaving as well, you kind of say goodbye.
It demonstrates the culture too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you're painting a really clear, big picture of what the business is like to work for, rather than scurrying them into a meeting room, come in here, don't look at anything.
Yeah.
And you sit it down in just an all white room like this one and not see anybody, only meet your interviewer. You don't have a flipping Scooby-Doo what the business is like, do you? So again, that just builds confidence. But I bet loads of businesses do that. I bet a lot of businesses bring people in for interviews,
just rush them through.
Don't want them to see anything. Don't just get them into a meeting room, and so they're able to tell them what it's like without them actually seeing what it's like and demonstrating what it's like.
Yeah. Or they, like you say, they just get shown into reception. All they see is the person on the reception desk, and then they're straight into the box room next door, and that's it.
What don't we do well then?
We do it all well.
Only thing that I think that we sometimes aren't as good as we could be is think because we're in a position at the moment that we're trying to grow the business quite quickly,
we get ahead of ourselves.
We get ahead of ourselves sometimes, and we want to stretch and push things, but then that's not always completely possible. So then we aren't as quick as we could be in terms of just like making a final decision or getting back to someone with a final decision, because we're kind of on the cusp of, could we take this person on, or is it the right time? And so I think that's maybe where we're our own enemy sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think that when we do go back and actually give people that feedback, we're always quite genuine with letting them.
It's always honest answers rather than, you just weren't the right person.
Yeah.
I mean, situations happen recently with that sort of thing, isn't it, really? It's really difficult because you really want to be able to take people on if they're the right kind of people, but if you can't and you try and drag it out a little bit and sort of, scraping your heels and whatever, it is really difficult. But as long as you're honest with that sort of stuff, all these things happen.
Scraping your heels.
Is that word?
Dragging your feet?
Dragging your feet. Scraping your heels.
It sounds so right. Scraping your heels.
Do you ask for feedback from people that you interview?
No. Yeah, should we? Potentially, yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Catch-22, and it's a really difficult one. What are the positives of doing that? Well, yeah, you get an understanding of what your interview process is like. Maybe you can understand their candidate experience. I think maybe you ask what how they felt the experience was. I wouldn't necessarily ask for feedback though, because I think if you are confident that you've got a good process, somebody else coming into your business, especially if they didn't get offered a role, all that feedback, material and genuine and actually worthwhile considering. I don't know. That's a really difficult one, isn't it?
But I think even for people that have joined the business, I think it would be interesting to hear how they, like you say, found the experience, rather than actually get feedback. I think
so it'd be good to measure the feedback, the experience maybe.
Yeah.
But like when you say feedback, I immediately think like the actual process and like the structure and like the particulars rather than their enjoyment factor.
Yeah, sorry, I meant experience then, not feedback.
Because that is a difficult one. But at the same time, you do want to be open to all sorts of feedback, don't you? Because, you might think you're doing things really, really well, but actually you're not. Yeah,
there's room for improvement. But yeah, who are you going to ask? It's more likely to be the people that join, and then are they going to give critical?
And it's always going to be positive.
Yeah.
Because why would they say anything negative?
Yeah.
Don't know. So it's a difficult one. I think it's also a balance between, if we gave feedback for every bloody interview we did and every interview that we did as recruiters, you'd just be wasting your time giving feedback all day and not actually doing things which, let's be honest, make money sort of thing. You'd be running the business quite inefficiently that way. So I think people do sometimes have to realise that. You see loads of posts up on LinkedIn, it's a right for me to have, application feedback, blah, 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 blah. Well, be a bit real sometimes, not everyone's going to come back to you with feedback on an application if you're a post-delivery drive or whatever, and you're applying for an associate role sort of thing, are you? You're not going to get feedback.
If you're applying to things that are completely irrelevant, then
I think it depends as well the stage.
Well, we had someone recently, didn't we, on our company page? He applied. Well, it was a really random degree that this person had done. They applied to.
It was nothing to do with the role that they applied.
It was nothing to do with the role they applied to. They applied to a specialist position. They got auto-rejected because they applied through LinkedIn, and if they don't meet the criteria, LinkedIn will auto-reject them. But then when they apply to positions, they automatically get invited to subscribe to like a newsletter as well. So then he sent a message with a lot of swear words in it.
Really?
Saying like, you've rejected my application and now invited me to follow your newsletter. You beep, beep, beep.
Yeah, F.
Hashtag marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a funny experience and situation with, an actual bad experience.
Oh,
and there was a candidate who I think was more of a contractor, looking for, permanent, that sort of stuff. I don't think they were particularly good, to be totally honest, after taking a few references, that sort of thing. But, they were in the interview and asked to go to the toilet, went to the toilet, and turns out they never came back and they climbed out the window and ran off. So, I mean, I think it's probably in a situation or like,
why not just
it's probably more candidate experience, they've just been a bit of a rogue candidate, but those dramatic sort of things can happen, can't they? They'll run off.
Oh my God, it's like
they'll run off and not come back.
How long would you wait before you went to the toilet looking for them?
Oh my God, that is such a good question.
They've been in there for 15 minutes.
Yeah, 15 minutes is surely the cut-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then imagine having to go in and actually look for them.
Finding that they're not there.
That'd be
The most
tough.
crazy part was it was a 4th story as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, jumped out the window. But yeah, I mean, you've got to offer a good candidate experience, and like, what are the negatives of not offering a good experience for, you know, an individual, not just at the application stage, but at any point in the process? I think the obvious is they're going to go off and talk to people and spread word that they haven't had a good experience. And, you know, where are the sort of first places that candidates will go to, or, you know, clients will go to, you know, to understand your business? It's your social media, it's your website, isn't it? So if you've got a bad or slow website, you know, if they have a bit of a frustrating experience with your website, are they just going to not even bother applying? Are they not even going to bother sort of buying and run off somewhere else?
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a really difficult, long, you know, drawn out application process, they're just going to go somewhere else.
You would, wouldn't you? I mean, we're all like it. When you hop on a website nowadays, if it's to buy something or whatever it's doing, if it's a slow loading website, you click off. Like, you're so attuned to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't got the patience.
Even if it's what you think is a shit website, you'd be like, oh, this is a rubbish website. Like, you lose credibility, don't you? Like, with this day and age, everybody's so tech savvy, everything's online. If you have a bad website, again, it kind of says a lot about the actual business, doesn't it? If they're not interested in having a good website, something that at least works and like stands out and displays like the right kind of information, it's just all a bit laissez-faire. Do they not care about, you know, everything else and who's coming to the business, that sort of thing?
I think it's worth saying as well that if you do have a bad experience, like, the first places that people will go to research your company business will be online. That's also the first place they'll go to shout about when it's not good. And people love talking about things that haven't gone well.
You only
and
really
more
hear
likely,
about the bad experiences.
Yeah.
Rather than the good
Well,
ones,
here's a
don't
stat
you?
from
That's
your
for sure.
part of your article that you had here. One of the stats at the bottom: 74% of job seekers would let others know if they had a negative experience with a company during the recruitment process.
And then 50% of candidates will not purchase goods or services from a company after a bad job application experience.
And a great experience of that is I've recently had a candidate, really good candidate, you know, the type of person which most companies would like to seriously consider if they had the vacancy for this person. You know, I go through a few different businesses with them, and, you know, 2 or 3 of them, he has said, no, I don't want to consider him at all, because he's got a friend that's worked there or heard something about, you know, their culture or what they don't do very well, you know, and that friend is probably likely that they've just had a personal bad experience. And I know for a fact these businesses aren't bad businesses, but, you know, the bigger companies, you only really hear the bad stuff. So it's a perfect example. You know, if you let anything bad get out, or those things happen that aren't dealt with very well, people are going to talk about it, and that can actually have quite a big knock-on effect to your business with people applying. This candidate's not interested in a couple of those businesses, which I know are good companies, because they've heard these stories.
Wow.
And he's not willing to set that aside to make his own personal judgment on these companies.
It's had that much of an impact.
Which has that much of an impact.
Wow.
And I know you're never able to, especially for the bigger businesses, you know, manage everything and offer everybody a good experience, because people are so different, aren't they? People get hung up on lots of different things, but the more you can, you know, keep that down, the lesser bad experiences, the less knock-on effect it will definitely have.
Yeah.
So how does a company start going around improving their candidate experience?
Good question. I've got 5 things here which we can go through.
Love it.
To be honest, I think we've been through a lot of them and spoken about a lot of them. The first one, be transparent about your expectations. You know, we spoke about that at the start, and I think that starts from adverts, you know, what kind of person you're looking for, interview, and your process. You know, you mentioned the process. If they understand the process, they understand exactly where things are going to go, and they understand why things are being done that way. Keep application forms and, you know, the application process short and sharp, I think. You know, I think you want to make it specific, but at the same time, you can't make it difficult for people to apply, because people are so busy. And like you said, if they've got options, they're not going to do it, are they? Treat candidates like humans. And I think that's like a really obvious one, isn't it? But you go onto so many big business, like ATS systems and, you know, CRMs, whatever. And it is so like, it's so digital. They give you a reference number, you know, they don't give you a name, you know, attach your CV, I want all this information for you. It goes on a database and it gets lost.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was reading earlier that I'll speak about it in a minute, but there was a time in Silicon Valley when all the big tech companies were all using the same ATS system.
Yeah.
And then every rejection email to candidates that weren't successful that was getting sent out was just the template that the ATS system
You didn't
provided.
even know which company.
Well, no, so you knew which company, but
Oh, right.
you might
They're
apply
all the
to 3
same.
different businesses, get rejected, and then get the same rejection email from all 3 because you're all using the same ATS.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just speaks to your point of like using your brand voice and actually speaking to people how you would speak to them as humans.
I think it's easy to forget when you're actually in the hiring process and you're recruiting, you forget what it's like to be a candidate and be in their shoes. And, for some people, it's a really daunting process going through this, and you're on the other side and you just want it to be like strategically as easy as possible so you can put their reference numbers in different spreadsheets and keep tabs of them like that. But yeah, it is easy to forget that they're actual people.
Very much so. Number 4 I've got here, and again, I think we have spoken about this, but use clear communication with timelines. I don't always think sometimes that like the quickest process is the best process, but as long as everybody, you could wait a week in between a first and a second interview or getting back to them, but as long as everybody's on the same timeline and understands why they're on that timeline, it's just managing expectations, isn't it? That might be the best thing that's, best for everybody. So as long as you're clear with that, I think that, manages everybody's expectations. There's no surprises.
Yeah. Just on that, just quickly, HubSpot do that really well. They have something called let me find it, candidate concierge, that's how you say it. And for every single candidate they take through the interview process, they have a dedicated person that's the point of contact for them, helping them navigate the process and feel valued. So every single timestamp,
Either work.
every single timestamp along the process, they've got somebody dedicated to them that's going to talk them through the situation and the next steps and what's going to happen.
Like that.
So having
sometimes you can be a bit jumbled, can't it? You might speak to one contact at a company, and then you might speak to a different person at a company, and who's your main point of contact?
Especially for a big business.
And then who's got the accountability for making sure that experience is nice. That might be a nice takeaway for some people.
Yeah, and especially like for a business like HubSpot, they're literally an email marketing provider. Their USP is communication. So that should be a highlight of their experience. It's called their candidate-centric communication strategy.
That's a mouthful.
It is, isn't it?
The last point I've got on here, number 5, is to try and use a structured interview approach. So, if it's the same for everybody, all the interviewers are all on the same page. Everybody, again, it's down to expectations. Everybody knows exactly what's coming up. You can prepare candidates for exactly what the process is going to be, so that they know what they can prepare for themselves. So the more structured it is, the more honest you are about your process, the more they can prepare, but they actually understand all timelines, and they can communicate that to either other options or other, third parties that need to know these sort of things.
Do you think that different roles that you're recruiting for needs a different interview structure?
I think it can be really difficult to say always use the same interview structure.
Yeah.
But I think you'll probably know for somebody, big dog, somebody quite senior, that your interview process is going to be slightly different to somebody that's a bit more junior. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because smaller businesses might not have the luxury of having a really stringent and good recruitment process. It might be a little bit, here and there sort of thing. Some candidates might like that a little bit more.
Yeah.
If it's a bit more informal.
So we were talking about it this morning. We were both looking up Airbnb, weren't we?
We were.
So Airbnb have got this nice sort of methodology for methodology for like a consumer experience, and they call it storyboarding, and that's all about how the experience that they want consumers to obviously go through while using Airbnb as a product, and they've used that really well to get teams and people in the business aligned and make that process as nice, as good as possible for consumers. But they've started to realize that candidates are starting to expect a consumer level experience, and like they weren't living up to that kind of expectation, were they? They weren't delivering on the sort of standards that they were setting with their consumer experience. So anyway, they started implementing storyboarding into their candidate experience. It's really interesting. They've got it laid out in each different phase. So I'll just run through the phases very briefly, but it's discovery. So that's the point where a candidate might discover the business that we were talking about earlier. Engagement and application. So we've spoken about that. recruiter screening. So that'd be like an initial screen from a recruiter, maybe looking at like a CV and going through their situation. Follow up and like some preparation. They've got then hiring team in phone interview. So that's what you mentioned about the first sort of phone call that you might have. And then follow up and prep for an on-site interview, post on-site interview, offer, and pre-start. So it's broken up into 10 different stages there.
That's intense.
It is.
That is intense. But what's nice about this is it's broken up into 10 different stages. And then it's got little bits and pieces listed about like who is going to be responsible for that part. You know, what sort of feeling do they want the candidate to go through? What resources they're going to use for that? And then one of the really nice bits and pieces that's in here is rejection at each stage. So what does rejection look like at each stage? And they've actually planned out what the rejection will look like for the person at that stage. And they've basically come to the conclusion that rejections are more important than offers because they're rejecting so many people. So because they're rejecting so many people, that can have such a big impact on their employer brand and their perception to the wider market. So they've really thought about what rejection needs to look like at each stage. So we'll chop that into the video, but it's a really interesting point to sort of look up and think about, and then actually break up your candidate experience into those different stages.
I think as well, when I was looking at it earlier, they have made the experience Airbnb. Like a lot of the storyboarding idea comes from is because the idea around Airbnb was based around like Disney, wasn't it? Because he read the book. What's the book called? Do you remember?
No.
The guy that made Disney.
Walt.
The guy that... Bloody hell. What's his name?
Anyway, he read the book, the founder of Airbnb, and Airbnb is all around how you can go beyond reality, and that's what they wanted to create in their candidate experience, because a lot of the people in the recruitment team were saying, oh, but because of that's a pain point, and that's a pain point, and they actually said, no, I don't want to hear anything's a pain point, because at Airbnb we go beyond reality, and that's what we're going to create for our candidates. I mean, that's obviously on a massive scale because they're Airbnb, but I think it's worth noting that you've got to make your experience unique to you and your business, and that's what sets you apart from other people.
Yeah, and then they were one of the companies that spoke about every business using the same ATS and the same rejection email going out to every candidate, and how unpersonal that is.
And they found that out by actually applying to the jobs themselves, didn't they?
Is that how it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then one other extreme example of a good candidate experience is a business called Kimberly Clark. They're a holding company for, what are they? So they're a multinational corporation for producing personal care and consumer products. So companies like Huggies and Kleenex and things are all within the group. But anyway, part of their candidate experience is they go above and beyond, offering candidates a luxurious experience when they travel to on-site interviews. So they provide a car service with a knowledgeable driver. So the driver will let them know all about the area that maybe they're relocating to or going to be potentially living in for new positions. A welcome basket in the hotel room full of like different products and stuff that they can use. Obviously just to make their stay more enjoyable. And yeah, that was it.
I mean, that's obviously
extreme.
Senior hires.
Yeah.
Senior hires. But it is interesting though, like, could you incorporate ideas like that if you are trying to bring somebody really senior into the business?
Oh yeah, that matters an awful lot.
Like you
it?
could almost have, a senior tier candidate experience. You could map it out. This is the kind of stuff that we want them to go through. This is how we want them to feel. Yeah, and like prep the office for that, prep the interview room for that. We want it to feel a certain way. We want these things to be there. We want to let them take away. Every company that you go to and visit has merch, has like some branded stuff. Can they take away your product? Can they take away some of your bits?
Well,
and
like
pieces?
Andy at Chorus last week.
Yeah,
they've made their own gin.
Yeah.
To be able to give to interviewers, new starters, pens, pencils, all that sort of stuff's great, isn't it?
That's a lovely example. So his big philosophy was he wants and that's one of the points in the Airbnb example. They've obviously got offer pre-start. Do they have onboarding? I thought they had onboarding, but they actually don't. Maybe pre-start.
What does Andy do? Go on.
So in terms of the onboarding process, it's about making that as smooth and enjoyable and impactful for the person as possible. So once they actually join the business, the first few weeks, first few days, they wanted to become part of the team as quickly as possible. So they had a whole Chorus pack, didn't they? Where it was like the Chorus gin, different notepads, different bits of merch.
That's like really above and beyond though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if somebody's coming in and thinking, oh wow, they've made their own gin for new starters, they've gone above and beyond, probably how they're going to act, throughout their business with every other employee.
Just
as well.
sets a standard from the start, doesn't it?
It does. It's that extra 1%.
It's extra 1%, and it got me thinking about we would get like a box of chocolates and a card.
That is lovely though. Goes a long way.
It's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
I've got an
Make
idea.
our own cider.
Yeah, I've actually got an idea. Every new starter, they get a book.
Wow.
That is a good idea.
Yeah.
Put it in the Conker boxes.
Yeah, we could put it in the boxes.
Finally got a use for that.
Give them
Are they
Atomic
big enough?
Habits as their
They're big
first
enough?
ever book, and then they join.
Yeah.
Just sets a standard.
Get them into the book club.
Get them in the book club.
It's a nice idea.
I was thinking, we've all come up with like really good candidate experiences. I was trying, or like just customer experiences. I was trying to think of bad ones, and I thought the perfect example, Ryanair.
What about it?
Their customer experience isn't necessarily that good, is it?
No, but that's their USP, isn't it?
That's what they turned it around.
Yeah.
Their cheap budget airline. Nobody really wants to pay loads of money to go on a plane a lot of the time, do they? Because it's usually just travel, work, business, a casual leisure. They've got pretty bad seating, like they don't really have refreshments, anything like that. It's like cattle on and off.
Yeah.
But they've used that to such a good advantage where they've played upon it on their marketing, which is so clever. If nobody's looked at the Ryanair like Instagram account or TikTok, and flipping do it, 'cause it's the best thing you'll ever. It's the best thing you'll ever see. But they know what they are, don't they? They've stuck to what they know, and it's a bit different from interview process, but it is just client experience, candidate experience.
Yeah.
They know what they are.
Well, I think it does come down to candidate experience, because people that apply for jobs at Ryanair know exactly what they're going into.
Exactly what they're going into. So they know their market.
Yeah.
They know their market so well that they're able to play on those sort of things and turn it into a positive spin. It's so funny.
There's loads of bad examples you can think of. There's loads. We've had, I don't want to not name any names, but we've had one this week of a candidate that's gone for a 2 or maybe a 3-stage interview process, travelled halfway across the country for a face-to-face meeting, and now has been told that
the role isn't even signed off.
The role's not signed off.
Oh gosh, didn't know that.
By more senior people.
And that's quite a senior level position, and what an experience for that person is.
Yeah.
It's so poor. And I don't think it's good enough in today's age to not have a, I don't know the right way to phrase this, to not have a good candidate experience. Like, you can't have a bad candidate experience, it's got to be a good candidate experience.
Yeah.
I think there's not even any room to just be in the middle, in no man's land.
The most frustrating thing out of like that whole situation, it could have been so easily like mitigated. It could be so easily changed. It's not like they've got to the third process and they found out the candidate's not good enough.
Yeah.
It's, they want the candidate. They want that individual. Like all the people, or the most like important people that will be working with that individual, they want the candidate, but it just hasn't been able to have been approved further up, like by the big dogs. And why wasn't that done like before this candidate's travelled across the country? Why wasn't it done before they even
right at the beginning?
People?
Yeah,
because now they've let this candidate down.
Yeah,
and that's a really poor candidate experience. And if that was me, I would think, well, I've just wasted my time there for them to not even think about that. And
you go and tell everyone you know.
Luckily, the candidate is quite, is all right with these sort of things. I think they had a good conversation. But if that was anybody else, that's a really difficult one, isn't it? If you put all your eggs into that basket and then all of a sudden you get knocked down like that, when you're expecting and assuming things to go well, you've been told you're going to get an offer and that happens.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Cool. Right, what can people do then if they want to find out more about all of this kind of stuff?
Take a look at the article on our website. Take a look at any of our socials. We shout about this all the time. Get in touch, obviously.
I think, very simply, get into the right mindset that not everybody wants to work for you and you have to attract them to the business. Interview people in a way that you would like to be interviewed. Simple, isn't it? Treat others how you'd like to be treated, and make it fun.
Yeah.
If you can make your workplace and interview experience fun, I think that makes such a difference just for everything. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think do some research. Don't just listen to us talking about it. The biggest and best companies in the world, Hubspot, Airbnb,
Google.
they're talking about these things. They're putting processes in place. Go and research what they've been doing, and you'll just take little bits and pieces away from it that you can implement into your own process. Maybe we can chuck some links in the show notes, or put some info in there so people can check that out as well, because there's some really interesting stories out there to learn from.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Thanks for listening.
Well
See you
done.
next time.